Hey folks, Bill here from Twin Tiers Homestead. So today we've got a bit of a small project that we're working on. We have a bunch of boards down here at our scrap barn. You may remember this if you saw the video when we did a tour of our homestead, that this barn we used to put a whole bunch of scrap wood in, some of its fence post, rails, and we also had all of this wood that came out of our living room and kitchen when we did a remodel on that a couple years back. We wanted to keep it all, and now we've talked about putting this up on the inside of our back screened in porch, the lower half, to work on converting that into a bit of a sunroom so that maybe we can grow stuff out there in the winter time. So what we're doing now is we're cutting it down to size, which is 43 inches. And then there's a bunch of nails in this, as you can maybe see from here. And we have to take all those nails out. Sometimes it's a bit of a pain because rather than nailing directly through the face of it, they nailed through the side of it. So getting these nails out, it'll be a bit of a challenge. So Billy's really loving that. Aren't you, Billy? So I'm doing all the cutting, and then I'm handing it over to Billy, and he's working to take the nails out. And you can see that we almost have half of a cart full. I don't really know exactly yet how much I need, but we're not going to be putting this up right now, but we do want to get it cut. So we're just going to let the camera roll, and you'll watch us work on filling up the cart. All right, folks, so we got our cart full of wood now. You can see that it's pretty uniform, varying widths on these. And like I said, I don't know exactly how much we need yet. we've got to lay it out and measure, and then measure around the bottom of the porch where we plan to put this. But we'll take you up and show you our intentions with this, and then you'll get a better perspective of it. So we're up on our back porch. You may have seen this on the bottom half here. It's all open right now. Actually, the whole way around, it's all open. And during the wintertime, this really isn't usable because snow will blow in here. So what we've talked about doing was, on the bottom half of this, all these boards that we've been cutting up, we'd like to close in the bottom half. So on the inside we'll put these boards, and then we're going to we'll take out these X-cross members here, and we'll put in regular studs. We're going to insulate that on the bottom, and then we're going to put plywood, Tyvek, and then siding on the outside of it. And on the top half of this here, we want to put clear panels that can be taken out in the summertime but left up in the wintertime. And then long term, we'd like to take the roof off of this and replace it with clear panels as well. That would essentially turn this into a winter greenhouse for us. We do have the ability to heat this out here because we do have natural gas that comes here. We can use it for our Blackstone. We can also use it for a space heater, a radiant space heater that's maybe attached up on top of the ceiling. So that will allow us to heat this if we needed to. But we're not ready to do all this yet. We just wanted to get these planks cut so that we could figure out how much we needed for this project. So our next step is to lay all these out, figure out how much we have in length, figure out how much we need, and to determine if we're short and if we need to cut more. So that's kind of our next step. Taking a measurement of the back porch, it looks like we need about 41 linear feet of board. Against the front of the workshop here, I've laid out a 20-foot section, and we've started to stack it up on 2 layers. So we're not quite at 40 feet. The second layer ends right about here. So we need still that much more to go. But you can kind of get a perspective of what this is going to look like when we do end up installing it and laying it out. So we need about 26 more pieces to cut, or about 13 boards. Billy's already got the cart down there. We're going to put the saw back in place. We're going to get these cut up, and then we'll stack them, put them away, storage someplace. There's some that are a little bent or twisted because they've been standing upright, and I think if we get them laying flat, then it'll help them straighten out a bit. So, all right, we're going to get them cut up, and then we'll wrap up the video. All right, guys, we finished cutting and laying all of our boards. I think we have about 43 linear feet altogether, so should be enough to cover the roughly 41 linear feet that we have, or that we need for our project. So we're going to stack this up right now, keep it flat as I mentioned, but our next step with this is we're going to have to run these through the planer to get them all cleaned off and get them all to have a uniform thickness. We're not going to do that today. It's something that we could maybe start to work on at night. All right, so while we're outside, I thought maybe I would check on our worm bins. So before we left on vacation, I had loaded these up with food, coffee grounds, some leftovers from the garden, and when I came out, this is what I found in the first one. It looks like some bean sprouts are growing. So I asked Karen about it, and she said, yeah, there were probably some beans from the garden. I'm going to take those out of here, or at least pull them out so they won't be alive. I'll leave them in there for the worms. I think we're probably going to need to add some water to this. I haven't tested it, but it does seem just a bit dry to me. There's definitely moisture in it, but I'll say that You know, overall, I actually expected this to produce a little bit better. We have the 2 worm bins, and I expected by this time, I think it's been at least 3 months, that the worm population double every 3 months, and I just don't know that I've seen that. So I don't know if we don't have enough food in here for them. I know that we've loaded it with paper, shredded paper, egg cartons, vegetables, the right kind of vegetables, and you know, banana peels and stuff like that. And it just hasn't quite taken off the way I would have expected. But I mean, they're definitely making castings, but there's just not enough right now to do anything with. Now, if I were to lift up here, you can see that there's a bunch of worms in there hanging down. So some of them live down in this lower layer. And pretty much this down here is all castings. Now this is covered by a screen and a plastic tarp with a hole in the center. And when I add water, if I add too much, it'll drain out through the bottom and into a glass jar down here. So that's, that right there is pretty much leftover castings. We had, I wouldn't say we filled this up, but we had the jar maybe a third to half of the way full, and we didn't do anything with it, but that's the dried version of the thing. So we're gonna add some water to this, and we're gonna check the other one as well. All right, so we're gonna check out the second worm bin here. Again, we've got some stuff, looks like some beans sprouts from the garden. Just gonna rake some of this over. And so these are the type of composting worms that I have. They're called red wigglers. There's a small one. So they are increasing their population size, just not as much as I expected when I first kind of started this whole thing. So one of the things that I keep an eye out for is what's the moisture level and the acidity level of the soil. We like the moisture to be maybe about a 5 on a scale of 10. So not sopping wet and not too dry. And to measure that, I have this meter here. And from an acidity standpoint, we like the soil to be pH neutral. And so there's a couple of options on this scale, on this meter. You can check for moisture. And so if I stick it in here now, we're right on the borderline of red to green, which is maybe about a 3.5. I like it to be around a 5 to 6. So we definitely have to add some water. And then from a pH perspective, we want it to be essentially all the way down to the other end of the scale, which is non-acidic. So when we check that, we're good. It sits way back down there. So I think from an alkalinity standpoint, we're good. We're going to add some moisture to this. We're going to kind of fluff this up a little bit and see what's going on underneath. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we had the chickens get into our garden, and they made a beeline straight for the pumpkins. So they've pecked into a number of pumpkins, and they're really not salvageable. So we're going to break those pumpkins up and stick them in here and see if the worms have any interest in them. This seems to be healthy. Definitely no complaints about that. It doesn't smell, so it's not like they're dead in here, and I can see them moving around. Let me just loosen some of it up a bit. Here's a eggshell that we put in before we went on vacation. That's really the only one I see in here, so they've consumed the rest. We also typically will tear up egg cartons, paper egg cartons, and put those in there. They seem to like that, and they do hold quite a bit of moisture. So it's good for them, it's good for their bedding. All right, so let's take a look underneath here. Oh, this one's heavy. So there you can see the worms hanging off. some smaller worms down below here. They'll eventually make their way up through when they're ready. And at some point when this gets full enough, I will add a second tray on here, and the bottom half will all be castings. So to water these, what we typically just do is we use a sprayer, half a gallon sprayer that's filled up with just water. And we spray them. After we spray it, we mix them to try to give it a uniform moisture. And that's it. We keep the top covered with a roll of paper, and we keep that wet to try to keep the moisture in. So these worm bins are something that either I'll check on from time to time, or Billy will check on when he's out here feeding the chickens. Generally the girls aren't so involved with them, which is odd because they both love to pick worms out of the grass, or whenever we overturn a rock, they love to go and feed them to the chickens. These are definitely not chicken worms. The purpose was for these worms to consume some of our kitchen scraps that we don't want to send to the chickens, or we just maybe have a little extra. Consume those scraps, produce the worm castings so that we could make what they call the worm tea out of, and then put that on our plants as natural fertilizer. I'm just going to mix this up a little bit more. Before we left on vacation, I had filled this all the way up with shredded paper, some food, and some of these egg cartons. And you can see from the side of the wood here how much they've consumed of that. They went through about half of it in about 4 weeks. So I just wish the population were a little bit bigger in here. That we could really start turning more of this waste over and let them turn it into worm castings and compost for us. That's ideally what our goal is. So let's check the moisture now. So we're just about at a 5. And that's just at about a 6. So I think it's pretty good. I sample throughout just to make sure it's good and there's no real dry spots. So I think this is good. We're going to add some pumpkin to this one as well, and then cover it, and then close it up. So we'll just take this and add it whole upside down. These pumpkins were going to be good until the chickens got a hold of them. They weren't ready yet, but they were well on their way. Just like to keep it covered with 2 rows of paper, and then I'll add water to the paper. Like I said, it helps keep the moisture in. Alright, so now that I have that there, just go through and spray it down. Make sure it gets a chance to soak in as much water as possible. All right, and then we'll just put the top back on, and that'll do it. That we're going to put out to the chickens. All right, folks, well, hope you enjoyed this video of us planning our back porch project and then doing an update on the worms. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions or comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We appreciate everybody's support. All right, guys, thanks. Take care. See you on the next video. Bye.